Hi besties, Irina here. If you're new to my channel, I've already introduced myself. Fuck. Hi besties, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Irina if you're new here, and if you've stuck around for however long you've been here, thank you. Today I have a March wrap up for you guys because once again I read a little bit too many books to put in a post. So I'm just gonna take you through the books that I read this month and hopefully it won't be too long. I also have my notes right next to me here because my brain is so small that I don't think I'd be able to remember everything that I read in great detail without having notes next to me. So if I'm just like looking over and not at the camera, that's why. Hopefully that's not too distracting though, so let's just get on with it. So as per usual, I'll start with the books that I didn't really like. So if you don't want to hear your faves get trashed, skip to the next part. Luckily I only DNF'd one book this month, and that was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. I can't even say her name. By Danielle L. Danielle L. Jensen. And The Bridge Kingdom follows Princess Lara, who gets sent to the Bridge Kingdom to marry Prince Aaron. But what Prince Aaron doesn't know is that Lara has been trained her whole life to bring the Bridge Kingdom to their downfall in order to save her own people. And I guess it's kind of like an enemies to lovers arranged marriage story. So let me just start with the non-spoiler things I didn't like about this book. Firstly, I really hated the names. I thought the world building was kind of interesting. I really liked how they described the Bridge Kingdom, but I feel like our world building was only really limited to what we could see in the Bridge Kingdom. I didn't really know that much about Lara's kingdom or anywhere else that was mentioned, and all the names kind of sounded the same, so it was pretty confusing. And I don't know if it's just me being pedantic, but I just wasn't feeling the names, okay? And it was really annoying to read. The next thing I didn't really like about this book is that I found Lara and Aaron to probably be the most passive main characters ever. Yeah, I just felt like they had no role in the story. All they did was react and react and react, and then they'd be like, I want things to be different. I need to save my kingdom. I need to bring peace. But they didn't really do anything. They were just kind of letting shit happen, trying their best to get involved in the action, which I at least appreciate, but they really weren't driving the story in a way that your protagonist should in a sort of young adult, new adult fantasy setting. And the last thing that actually made me DNF this book is, and I'm gonna put a spoiler warning for you guys, I hated the main conflicts in the book. I hated the way that Aaron finds out that Lara is a spy. I hate that she pretended not to have written all those letters and betrayed him even after she didn't really betray him, and she switched sides and she learned the truth. And it was all just really confusing and so could have been so easily avoided that it was just such a stupid storyline. I had to stop reading. It was too annoying for me. And I guess that feeds into what I was saying before about Lara and Aaron kind of being really passive main characters. It's like you can't even betray your lover in an active way. If you think I should continue and finish off the book and read the second one, let me know, but I really don't feel compelled to do it. The second book I did finish, but I only gave it 1 star, and I don't know if anyone's gonna come for me for saying this or not liking this book. That book is Rhapsodic by Thalassa. I think I got her name right. This is the first book in the Bargain series, which I keep seeing again and again recommended for fans of ACOTAR. And, you know, I thought it would be a good time. I thought the blurb made the book sound really exciting, but I really didn't like this book. Rhapsodic follows the main character Callie, who is a siren living in the mortal world, and I think she's a private investigator. And then one day the king of one of the fairy courts comes to visit her and tells her it's time for her to repay her debts. And then it kind of has a dual timeline where it takes place what happened 8 years ago and what happens in the present, and how Callie gets involved with this fairy king Desmond, who is known to mortals as the Bargainer, and what has happened leading up to events in the present. And then there's a murder mystery, and there's just like a lot going on, but I don't think anything was really developed very well, which is why I guess I was quite frustrated reading this book. And again, this book was recommended for fans of ACOTAR, but to me it felt just a little bit too similar to ACOTAR, in a sense that it almost felt like I was reading some alternate universe ACOTAR fanfiction, which, you know, maybe I'd want to read at some point, but that was just not what I was expecting from this book. The next thing I really didn't like about this book is also the murder mystery kind of storyline. The book premise has Desmond coming to visit Callie to get her to help him solve a series of murders that are going on in his court. And the storyline was pretty pointless, not gonna lie. I just didn't understand why it was there. It was random. It didn't add anything to the story. When the killer was revealed, I was just like, he got like one mention in the whole book before he was revealed as the killer, and he didn't even make like a real appearance. You never even met him until he was revealed as the killer. So I thought that was pretty anticlimactic. And I guess the last thing I really didn't like about this book is there's a trigger warning for sexual assault in this book, and I don't think the topic was handled very well. For me, it just felt a little too much like a plot device. I know there are times where the main character is said to be healing from this and all that stuff, but I don't know, you just didn't really see it. It was a little too much tell not show, and because of that it just felt very empty and really unconvincing, and it felt kind of underdeveloped, I think. So moving on to the books that I thought were just okay, the first one I have to show you is this book, which is Kim Gordon's Girl in a Band. Girl in a Band is the memoir of Kim Gordon, who is the lead singer of Sonic Youth. She talks about her life and growing up and the formation of her band and her marriage and eventual divorce to her bandmate Thurston Moore. In theory, I should love this book. I love Kim Gordon. I love Sonic Youth. This book was made for me. However, this book was just okay. I thought there were a few exciting moments, mostly pertaining to Kim growing up in the 60s, what it was like to grow up in 60s California, and I loved hearing about the process of how she made her albums, particularly Goo, her fascination with Karen Carpenter. But the book felt really angry to me, and I don't know, there's just like a lot of resentment in the words, and that's fine, except for the fact that I don't feel like the reason for her anger or the reason for resentment was elaborated or explored or developed well in the way that she's writing. I'd say the way she's writing is more in vignettes of her life, snapshots, little gists of what her life was like. And because of that, when it comes to expressing kind of those deeper, darker emotions, everything kind of feels a little flat. It feels a little bit cold, and it feels kind of surface level, and that was disappointing to me because, you know, I get it. Thurston Moore did her really dirty, but I don't know, there was just something about the way this book was written. I think it's written in the way she writes her songs, and while they work for punchy, buck the system bangers, this story is not very emotional, but it's not really an empowering story as well. It doesn't really evoke any kind of emotion apart from like annoyance and maybe like a slight superiority complex, because Kim Gordon is way cooler than me and that's fine. I just wish this book was a little bit more introspective. The next book that I read, which was ultimately just okay for me, is Kingdom of the Wicked by, give me a minute to try and say her name properly, Kerri Maniscalco. Did I get that right? I was really excited to read this book, but it was a little bit disappointing. Kingdom of the Wicked is about these twin witches, Victoria and Amelia. They're basically trained their whole life to not draw any attention from the princes of hell. But one day, Victoria turns up dead. Amelia finds her body, and Amelia swears revenge and sets off to find whoever did this to her sister. And in the process, she kind of ends up summoning one of the princes of hell, Prince Wrath, and they form this unlikely partnership in trying to solve this murder. This book was so promising. I really wanted to love this book, but ultimately I think it fell just a little bit flat. My main issue with this book is the fact that I think that there were too many open-ended questions, too much was left unresolved, to a point where I think it almost looks like lazy writing, even though I know it's not. I just feel that the author withheld too much information trying to build this intrigue for the next book and what's to come and this big great mystery, but in doing that I think she made the story just a little too random, where you just didn't really see what was happening, what was going. You feel like you're sitting in the blind spot. And the way that things were resolved, from what I can tell about what's out about book 2, it just seems like everything has kind of a red herring. And another thing I had a problem with this book, and this is actually a spoiler, so I'll tell you when to skip, but in the resolution at the end where Amelia finds out Antonio is a witch hunter and he's the one who's been killing these girls, what the fuck, man? Because I feel like the whole beginning of the novel, Amelia keeps saying the witch hunters did it, the witch hunters did it, and obviously no one believed her, and she turned out to be right all along. And we know Amelia has 0 brain cells, okay? So how come she was able to guess the killer? Like, where was the character development? I feel like that kind of backslided a little bit, and I don't know, I just found it really annoying. So if you were annoyed by this, let me know. Let me know if I'm not the only one. What I can say Kerri did well is she did really make me want to read the next book, because those last 4 chapters were a fucking mess, but you bet I want to know what happens next. I'd say if you really like The Cruel Prince and Serpent and Dove, you may like this book. For me, I didn't like it as much as I liked The Cruel Prince, but I liked it a lot more than I liked Serpent and Dove. So, okay, on to the good books that I read this month, the ones I gave about 4 stars to, 3.5 to 4. The first book I have to show you is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa mossfegh. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows this unnamed narrator who is this young, attractive, rich Columbia graduate who suffers from depression. And one day she wakes up and she decides that she wants to sleep for 1 whole year. So in order to do this, she gets a doctor, and she gets this doctor to prescribe her a bunch of different sedatives and pills, and she thinks that once she sleeps as much as possible for this whole year, she'll wake up transformed. Basically, the novel kind of documents her journey of what it's like sleeping for this whole year, what she gets up to when she's awake, and her tumultuous relationships with her one friend and I guess her ex-boyfriend. This book was really fucking weird, but I loved it. I think that Ottessa mossfegh did a great job writing from the perspective of someone who was depressed. I think you really felt it in the words, how lethargic she was, how tired she was, and it kind of made you feel that too, the way the story drags sometimes. I think the protagonist is so unlikable, but the thing she says does make you laugh, and she's just so ridiculous yet kind of relatable at the same time, and I thought that was just like an interesting way of kind of telling this sort of story. I wasn't sure where the story was going, but the ending was really good. I feel like I should have been able to tell it was heading in this direction based on the setting, but I really didn't. But that just made the ending all the more shocking to me, and it just kind of left me thinking about it. Like days after, I was still thinking about that ending, and I'm still thinking about that ending remembering this book now. So the next book I have to show you that I gave 4 stars to is actually this book here, which is LA Woman by Eve Babitz. So LA Woman is written in the style of kind of a faux memoir, and it follows Sophie, who's like a 20-something-year-old, attractive. She's said to be a Jim Morrison groupie. It's basically just about her life from, I think, age 17 onwards, and all that she gets up to and how she finds her place in, I guess, this world. The thing about this book, right, don't trust the blurb in the back. I feel like the blurb kind of set it out to be quite different from what it ended up being. I thought this would be more about Jim Morrison and her time as a groupie, but that was hardly talked about. So if that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find it here. What you will find is a really nice story about a 20-something-year-old girl who has no idea what the fuck she's doing in her life, figuring things out. Or sometimes not even, just enjoying her life really is what she's doing. And I love that, honestly. So once you get past that kind of block, I guess, if you went into this book expecting something different, it's actually quite an enjoyable read. I really thought the way Sophie was pretty set on just doing her own thing, never getting married just because everyone else was, or because she was bored, was a pretty modern idea, especially for the time period, and I admired kind of her zest for life and the way in which, you know, you don't have to know exactly what you're doing or have this aggressive path that you're chasing in order to feel fulfilled and happy. Also, Eve Babitz, great writer. She's so pithy, she's so funny. If you can start your book with the line, "One summer morning while I was still a virgin, though my virginity was on its last legs, I woke up and didn't want to go to New Jersey," you are an icon, honestly. Lastly, the books that I absolutely loved that I read in the month of March. The first one being the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. And yes, I read all the books, including the novella, and I'm just gonna try and wrap up what I thought about the whole series, because, like, do you really want to see me go on and on about the series? Like, if you do, I can do a whole other video. The series follows Jude, who, along with her sisters Taryn and Vivi, are taken to the fairylands to be raised by their general Maddox after he kills her parents. And after growing up 10 years in this fairyland, Jude decides that she really wants to live here, that this is definitely home for her. So she sets out to prove that she's worth staying in fairy, even though she's a mortal girl. And in doing this, she kind of finds herself in the middle of the political games and machinations leading up to the coronation of the next king, not to give too much away. In that, there's also this sort of enemies to lovers romance between Jude and the youngest and most wicked of the king's sons, Cardan, and the books explore their relationship and how it grows eventually from hate to love. Honestly, this is one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read. I thought it was just so fun, it was so whimsical, and I really liked how Holly Black built this world and how she described these fairies and how she made them different from humans. I thought The Cruel Prince was a great first book to start the series off with. It's so fast-paced, it's so interesting. You get to see Jude go on her adventures and kind of figure things out as she goes, but she's also not a complete newbie to this world. She knows how the world works. She knows how to adapt to the situation that she's been put in, and I think that was really great to see. I think in terms of main characters and having first-person stories, Jude was a great first-person story. The second book, The Wicked King, I rated even higher than The Cruel Prince. I thought the story was developed. I thought the way that they explored the relationship between Cardan and Jude And I don't want to talk too much about the plot of book 2 if you haven't read book 1, but everything that goes down there, just even more political games, even more of Jude taking a very active central role in what's happening in the lands, is really exciting to me. And I think the second book did a really good job at developing Cardan's character from kind of a hateful, resentful, toxic guy into someone realizing that he can indeed do better and that he actually wants to. I think of the 3 books in the main series, Queen of Nothing was probably my least favorite. I still gave it like 4 stars maybe. I just thought in terms of plot, the Queen of Nothing was definitely a lot weaker, and in terms of just pacing, I felt like everything was just a little too fast-paced. I think there wasn't a lot of time for things to sink in, for you to really invest and have an emotional attachment to whatever was happening, because everything was just one to the next. Thought that the plot was just not as strong. I just thought there were moments that could have been developed a little bit more and a little bit better. And then lastly, I did read the Cardan novella, How the King of Elfham Learned to Hate Stories. And I think if you adjust your expectations for a novella, you could really enjoy this. I think I liked the way that it didn't feel like too disjointed. There was one central theme. The second last book I have to show you that I actually gave 5 stars to is this book over here, which is Kate Elizabeth Russell's My Dark Vanessa. This book has a trigger warning for sexual assault, but the story follows Vanessa Y, who at 15 embarks on this relationship with her high school English teacher. This book then switches between 2 timelines, the past of her getting involved in this relationship and kind of the consequence of that, and also in the present. And I guess it kind of explains or explores the psychological dynamics between these 2 people in this relationship, where there is a very clear power imbalance. Honestly, I really love this book. I thought it was great. There's a reason I gave it 5 stars. I do think there is a danger in kind of telling stories like this where there is quite a bit of triggering content. I think you're either at risk of not making the traumatic experience kind of a forefront in the plot, and then it becomes kind of a plot device to further the story or to make a character seem darker or edgier. And on the other hand, if you focus too much on the trauma, you're kind of at risk of making this into trauma porn. But for this book, I didn't find that to be the case. I thought it perfectly struck the balance of really showing you the traumatic scenes, but not kind of showing that to you just to make you cry or just to make you uncomfortable. It's there to feed the story, and I think that's a testament to how good and thought out the story was. I thought this book was really interesting in terms of the ideas it was trying to say about the Me Too movement, about what it's like to survive sexual assault, what can be considered sexual assault, and kind of the complicated feelings associated with having that sort of trauma. I thought Vanessa was a really great character. I think she was so relatable to a point where even when she was frustrating you to no end, you still kind of felt for her and you still were invested in her story, and you didn't really want to get angry at her. I thought she was really complex, and I liked the multifaceted layers that you got to see about her pain, about her guilt, about why she needs to believe her own lies. I don't know, it was just such a nuanced, complex story that was very character driven, and I think that is so up my alley, and that's why I ended up liking this book so much. Finally, we reached our last book that I really loved, and almost the end of this video. So the last book I have to show you that I gave, I think, 4.5 stars to is this book here, which is Bunny by Mona Awad. This book, what can I say about it? The plot, for starters. It follows Samantha, who's in her last year of her MFA program, and she gets suddenly invited by a group of girls in her class who call each other Bunny to one of their smut salons. After spending some time with them, she kind of realizes that they seem to be creating these darlings, which are not quite human, but very human-like, out of bunnies. And I guess there's a trigger warning for animal cruelty, but also not really, so if that makes you uncomfortable, don't check this book out. But these darlings end up becoming what is their ideal man, even though they're kind of human-like but not completely human. I'd say if you read The Basic 8 by Danielle Handler, you might like this book. I think they have a very similar vibe. It's kind of that secret history, but make it cult classic. I see this book being compared to Mean Girls and Heathers and Alice in Wonderland and Kerri, and it is really all of those things. I think that's the compelling thing about this book. It's kind of a little bit all over the place, but in the best possible way. This is by far the weirdest book I read this year, possibly ever. But there is a lot of things to unpack in this story, and a lot of things are really kept open-ended, so if you don't really like that in your stories, maybe don't check this one out. But it is kind of a bit of a satire of what it's like to be on an MFA program and I guess at a liberal arts college, but at the same time it also feels like, you know, a kind of love letter to the power of your own imagination. I really enjoyed the writing style of this. I thought it was really funny, and I think like even when the text was repetitive, it didn't seem like it was lazy writing. It really felt like it was part of this character's personality. And Mona Awad has this really interesting way of writing in which she can make you feel so disoriented, but at the same time she gives you just enough for you to work out what's happening, and just it's just great. I particularly liked the second section of the book after Samantha joins the bunnies. I thought reading that was so confusing and amazing, but even as confusing as the story gets, I think Mona Awad really does a good job at keeping the story readable for its audience. So that's all the books that I read in the month of March. I don't know why. I've tried filming this video like twice already and nothing is coming out the way I want it to. If you want me to post a full review with spoilers about any of the books that I've mentioned on my channel, let me know. If you checked out my video, thank you. If you made it to the end, thank you. If you watched 2 minutes of this, thank you. And obviously don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed anything in this video. Hopefully I'll have a more interesting, better video up for you guys soon. But in the meantime, bye bye for now. See you soon.